There's a funny thing that happens when you hear the phrase $1 million. Even now, even after decades of working, saving, worrying, and watching prices creep up at the grocery store, it still lands with a certain weight, doesn't it? $1 million sounds safe, solid, like you finally made it to the other side of something. But then, reality sneaks in. Because here's the quiet question most people don't say out loud. Is $1 million actually enough anymore? And more specifically, is it enough if you're retired versus still working? Those two situations look similar on paper, same number, same commas, same pride, honestly, but in real life, they feel wildly different, almost like two entirely separate universes. You can have $1 million and still wake up at 3 a.m. wondering if you should really order the salmon instead of the chicken. Or you can have $1 million and feel oddly calm, like life finally exhaled with you. Same money, totally different experience. And the difference isn't just about how much you spend, it's about when the money is working and when you are. I've noticed this over the years, talking to neighbors, friends, family, people at the diner who overshare once the coffee gets refilled, that some folks with $1 million feel surprisingly tight, almost trapped, while others with the same amount feel, well, lighter. Not flashy, not reckless, just lighter. And that contrast, it's not talked about nearly enough. Somewhere along the line, I started paying close attention to that gap, the emotional gap, the mental gap, the way money behaves differently once your paycheck stops showing up every 2 weeks. My name's Robert, by the way, and I've spent more time than I probably should thinking about money, aging, and why retirement feels peaceful for some people and quietly stressful for others. What I want to talk through today isn't fear-based. It's not about doom or running out or scary charts. It's about perspective, a shift in how you look at that $1 million and what changes once work steps out of the picture. Because once you see this difference clearly, something subtle but powerful happens. You stop chasing a number and start chasing peace of mind. And honestly, that's where everything changes. When you're still working, even part-time, $1 million feels like a fortress. There's this psychological cushion that comes from knowing, well, I don't actually need to touch that yet. The money just sits there, growing, behaving, doing its little compounding thing while your paycheck handles the daily mess of life. Gas, groceries, property taxes, the new water heater that breaks at the worst possible moment. All of that gets paid by income, not savings. And that's a huge deal. I've talked to people who are still working at 62, 65, even 70 with $1 million saved, and they feel almost untouchable, like they could weather just about anything, because mentally that million isn't money to live on yet, it's backup, insurance, a safety net with a lot of padding. But then retirement hits, and suddenly that same $1 million has a new job description. Now it's not just there. Now it's responsible. It has to pay you every month for decades, through inflation, market swings, medical surprises, and all the I didn't see that coming moments life loves to toss in. That's when the illusion fades. Because while you're working, your savings are the reserve parachute. In retirement, they become the airplane. And that shift is jarring. This is why someone with $1 million and a paycheck often feels more secure than someone with $1 million and no paycheck, even if the retiree technically has more time freedom. Time freedom is wonderful, but income replacement, that's the real psychological adjustment. So if you're still working and thinking, I feel pretty good with what I've got, that makes sense, completely. Just understand the feeling changes once the paycheck stops, and that doesn't mean you failed. It just means the rules changed. When you're working, spending feels reversible. You buy something and in the back of your mind you think, hey, I'll make it back. Another paycheck is coming, another bonus, another year. But in retirement, spending starts to feel final. You pull money from savings and there's this quiet voice that says, that's gone now. That piece isn't coming back unless the market does something nice. It changes behavior. I've seen retirees with $1 million hesitate over a $4,000 vacation they've wanted for years, not because they can't afford it, but because every withdrawal feels like carving away a piece of the future. Working adults don't think like that. They think in cycles. Retirees think in lifespans. And that difference alone explains why $1 million can feel generous in one phase of life and restrictive in another. Here's the irony. Many retirees actually underspend. They become so careful, sometimes too careful, that they miss out on experiences they worked decades for. Now I'm not saying spend wildly. I'm saying understand the emotional math you're doing. Because if you don't name it, it quietly controls you. $1 million in retirement isn't just a number, it's a responsibility you carry every time you swipe a card. And that weight, it's real. Let's talk about healthcare briefly, calmly, without panic. Because this is where the difference between working and retired really shows up. When you're working, healthcare is annoying but manageable. Premiums come out of your paycheck. You grumble, but it's predictable. In retirement, healthcare becomes personal. Medicare helps absolutely, but it doesn't cover everything, and the stuff it doesn't cover tends to arrive quietly: dental, vision, hearing, prescriptions, long-term care. The kind of expenses that don't feel dramatic until they pile up. And here's the key difference. When you're working, rising healthcare costs eat into income. When you're retired, they eat into principal. That's a different psychological hit. It's why retirees with $1 million often feel more cautious than working folks with less. The money now has to absorb shocks. The good news: planning helps, understanding helps, having realistic expectations helps even more. But ignoring this difference, pretending retirement expenses behave the same way, that's what causes stress. Inflation doesn't announce itself. It just quietly raises the price of things you already buy. When you're working, inflation is irritating. Raises might keep up, side income helps you adapt. In retirement, inflation is personal. Because your income often doesn't rise the same way prices do. $1 million at 65 does not buy the same lifestyle at 85. That's not fear, it's math. This is why investment strategy matters more after retirement, not less, and why being too conservative too early can backfire. Your money still needs to grow, just carefully. These catches people off guard. When you stop working, you don't just lose income, you lose structure, identity, validation. And money starts filling emotional gaps it was never meant to fill. People start measuring self-worth through account balances, through how little they spend, through how safe they feel. But money was never meant to replace purpose. This is where retirees with $1 million can feel surprisingly empty, while others feel deeply content. The difference isn't money. It's meaning. And that matters more than any spreadsheet. When you're working, time is scarce, money feels more flexible. In retirement, time is abundant, money feels finite. That reversal changes everything. You start valuing convenience differently: comfort, health, energy. $1 million gives you choices, but only if you allow yourself to use them intentionally. The happiest retirees I know aren't the ones with the biggest portfolios. They're the ones with predictable income. Social Security, pensions, annuities, rental income. Because predictability reduces stress more than raw wealth. $1 million paired with predictable income feels radically different than $1 million standing alone. At some point, retirees start thinking about what's left behind. But here's the truth nobody says gently enough. Your life matters too. $1 million doesn't need to be perfectly preserved to be meaningful. It needs to support a life well lived. So here's the quiet truth. $1 million isn't small, it isn't meaningless, and it certainly isn't something to dismiss. but it behaves very differently depending on whether you're still working or fully retired. While you're working, it feels like protection. In retirement, it becomes partnership. It has to last, it has to adjust, it has to support you, not just sit there and look impressive. And that's okay. The goal isn't to feel rich. It's to feel steady. To wake up without that low-level hum of worry. To enjoy the mornings. To spend without guilt, but not without thought. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this conversation, it's this. Peace of mind doesn't come from hitting a number. It comes from understanding what that number actually needs to do. And once you understand that, once you really see the difference between working money and retirement money, the fear softens. You stop asking, is it enough? And start asking, is this working for the life I want? That's a much kinder question. And honestly, it leads to much better answers.